Welcome to Simply Suspicious, the podcast where history gets side-eyed and ghosts get their overdue performance reviews. Today, we're perching at the Tower of London, home to kings, queens, traders, tourists, and the only birds with better job security than the monarchy. For nearly 1,000 years, this place has been part fortress, part prison, part execution site, and part gift shop with trauma. The tower's seen everything: beheadings, betrayals, and at least one royal marriage that could have been solved with a good therapist, but instead they went with axe. And through it all, the Ravens, the unbothered, underpaid witnesses to every bad decision England ever made. They've watched queens lose their heads, guards lose their minds, and tourists lose their composure. If walls could talk, they'd scream. But the Ravens, they just shrug and say, typical humans. So grab your crown, keep your head attached, and maybe don't make eye contact with the birds. This week, we're diving into the bloody, bone-chilling, and mildly bureaucratic hauntings of the Tower of London. The Tower of London has stood for almost 1,000 years, watching, waiting, and occasionally decapitating. I actually visited the tower recently, and let me tell you, the air there feels heavy. Not creepy tourist attraction heavy, more like a lot of bad decisions happened here heavy. Even with hundreds of visitors and Yaman warders cracking jokes, there's this undercurrent, a silence that settles in the corners, like the walls still remember. It started as a fortress in 1078 when William the Conqueror decided he needed a statement piece that said, yes, I run this place now. Over the centuries, it's been a royal palace, a prison, a treasury, a zoo, and, briefly, a really inconvenient Airbnb for anyone who annoyed the crown. It's where Anne Boleyn lost her head, where princes vanished without a trace, and where a handful of ravens were somehow promoted to national security assets. Every stone in the tower has absorbed centuries of blood, power, and paranoia, which, as it turns out, is the perfect recipe for a haunting. Today, it's one of London's top tourist attractions, which feels a little weird when you realize half the photos on Instagram were taken 10 feet from a former execution site. But hey, if you've ever wanted to feel the cold breath of history on your neck, the tower's open daily until 5:30. Anne Boleyn remains the tower's most famous resident and apparently its most photogenic ghost. I did not get any pictures of her, but they are out there on the interwebs if you would like to do some deep diving. She arrived in 1536 believing the king might spare her. He didn't. She was executed on Tower Green and buried in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, a stone's throw from where she spent her last night praying. Guards still claim to see her pacing near the chapel, sometimes carrying her head, because if you've got it, flaunt it, right? The ravens still perch near her resting place, feathers black against the pale stone. They've watched more tears than any historian ever will, and if you stand there long enough, you might feel them watching you back. Anne wasn't the only royal to meet a grim end here. Just a few steps away lies one of history's coldest mysteries, the disappearance of the princes. In 1483, Edward V and his little brother Richard were brought to the tower by their uncle, Richard III. They were never seen again. Skeletons were found centuries later, but no one can prove the bones were theirs. Visitors say they sometimes see two pale figures holding hands near the bloody tower. The ravens roost above them still. Maybe they remember the night the lights went out, the whisper of fear, the last echo of footsteps, and decided never to leave that corner again. By the 1500s, the tower had become less a fortress and more a very stylish execution venue. Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, was only 16 or 17 years old when she was executed in 1554 after a failed political grab she never even wanted. They say her ghost appears at dawn on the anniversary of her death, a faint shimmer of white along the battlements. The ravens, of course, were there. They circle low in winter, the same path over Tower Green where she died. If guilt leaves residue, they've been tracking it for centuries. And some hauntings linger out of sadness. Others, sheer outrage. Margaret Pole was 67 when Henry VIII ordered her beheaded, and the executioner missed more than once. Witnesses said she ran, the axemen chasing her around the scaffold until it was done. To this day, guards claim to hear a scream near the Queen's house that doesn't belong to any living throat. Even the ravens reportedly scattered from that spot, and honestly, who can blame them? Of course, not every resident of the tower has been human or particularly well behaved. The ravens have been here so long that people call them the guardians of the realm. Legend says if they ever leave, the kingdom will fall, which sounds ancient and mystical until you learn no one actually knows where the story came from. It just started sometime in the 1600s. Historians think Charles II might be to blame. His astronomer wanted the birds gone because they kept knocking over his telescope. The king, apparently too lazy to move the telescope, declared the ravens sacred instead. And just like that, superstition became job security. They even have a raven master, clipped wings, and names. And in 1986, one named George was dismissed for, quote, conduct unbecoming of a tower resident, end quote, after stealing lunches, destroying TV aerials, and cursing at tourists, which frankly makes him my favorite historical figure now. The Tower of London is haunted, yes, by queens and princes, by guilt and ambition, but the ravens have seen it all. They watched crowns rise, bodies fall, and empires wobble. They watched me, too, standing there with my camera, probably wondering why humans keep coming back to gawk at the mess we made. Maybe the tower isn't haunted because of ghosts. Maybe it's haunted because it remembers. And the ravens, they're the memory made flesh, black-winged witnesses, making sure history never quite gets away with it. So what have we learned? 1. Don't marry Henry VIII. 2. Never trust your uncle if he owns a crown. And 3. If the ravens ever start packing their bags, maybe go ahead and panic. I'm Sarah. This has been Simply Suspicious. Follow along on Instagram at simply_suspicious for photos of my tower visit. And remember, if it sounds haunted, it's probably historically accurate. Bye, y'all.